미년바 포고 보면 가서 인라 라세네게도 팀이 올라 따다주셔거로 렐레서 거래.
I don't exactly get the meaning of how it fits in, but it talks, what's happening is it's juxtaposing a crazy wild horse, a horse that has not been tamed, to like sort of the type A person who's always, exactly on time. So there's some saying about that.
미년 둘사 따사 미년바 둘사데 헬레서사데다 따사케나 팀오니 되게 견복이 시거래 감정경기 시거래 예경기 시거래 기구기요래 그저 올라제도 곧 따다 주 미들 주버지 주거래.
So for the la
미년바 탑사라고 말해. 따세나라. 미년 둘사 따사 스타르년 둘사 제당.
do you trust us in that?
따사잖아 트라바 소사라와. 트라바.
Traba.
곰파.
Lasso.
미년바 둘사당 곰파래라고 그런 곰파. 따사 트라바 소사. 트라바 팀이여라 팀만 보여라.
So even though, there might be, so the wild horse, the horse that is not tamed, there's no telling, no, keeping that horse on the right path at the right time. But for
제당하고 제당.
Chetang, what I need the drotang nangchin.
제마전에 센로와. 다 비치레는 제당 제마만 보여라. 제메가 사이치레 유두 말아 같이 슈신이나. 따님바데 빼미 하장 유부 첨부였나? 제메가는 걔네들이 빼 샀다니 디제나 콜레레서 거라. 콜람가는 경투거. 제메당 제당.
아니 디 chetang di minyompa ki kolo di tanyompa.
따님바래 제당데. 따님바도 사데 제메당가드레스.
So
미녀가 잡아내서레스.
So what kind of slows down the wild horse that's not staying on the straight and narrow and just going wherever they want, what slows them down is deep sand, right? So if we're trying to make any headway plodding through deep sand, it's not so easy. And so that's what slows down and paces the horse. And what slows down and paces the wild person is the monastery. Because in the monastery, right, they have the lopans and the teachers and the lamas and the people who institute the rules. And there's all kinds of rules and regulations in the monastery. So that's why it said that which tames and paces the horse is a path of deep sand, and that which paces the wild person is the monastery. So when you're learning, when you're young and you're learning to ride a horse, you learn to ride a horse in the sand, in the deep sand, where you can really learn to control the horse. And the horse, doesn't have so much control itself. It has to be slowed down and tamed by the sand. You're not so likely to get thrown by the horse. But when you're young and, also it's a wild horse and you're on the horse and you're on a regular track, on regular course, they can go really fast and you get tossed off, you get thrown, but you won't get thrown in the sand because they can't go very fast. Make sense?
Make sense? Tarnyin tulsa chetang mirngen tu sa trasa.
Oh,
Trasa
laugh. It's kind of funny. For me anyway, so I'm laughing, but it looks like Geshe-la's laughing too. He's like, it's, makes sense, right? That slows and tames, paces the wild horse is a course of sand, and that which tames and paces the wild person is the monastery.
The monastery team mamboje teni te gala nemba changthung sa yomara changthung na mingyombe gala nyomba zogro.
Also, in the monastery, you're not going to find the tavern or the bar, so you're not going to be drinking that crazy water that's going to make you a little crazy and wild. So that's the other thing. There are rules and regulations, and you're not going to find the tap room.
Keso crazy water thungin kaze kare.
So Geshe-la saying, raise your hand. How many people drink the crazy water?
We no need crazy water. I already negative emotion crazy. Another crazy what to do?
More crazy.
Yeah, plenty crazy now.
Hello, Geshe-la.
Huh?
I'm still in Mexico and it's really windy here.
Yeah.
I've invited Alejandra and Moya to join us. I don't know if they will or not. but we'll
Okay,
see.
no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. How are you?
I'm okay.
Yeah, good.
More than okay.
How are things in Mexico?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Our mind is controlled anyway, similarly,
Yeah,
almost heaven.
I think seeing beauty is one way of having a mind that's controlled.
Yeah,
For
Dalai
me,
Lama also say,
Yeah,
inner beauty, really beauty.
yes,
Inner
yes.
beauty meaning what? Need, develop compassion, forgiveness, tolerance,
Mhm.
loving kindness. That who have that, they have fully inner beauty.
Yeah,
That then you where go, you get easy to friend, easy to anyway.
Ani Geshe-la, poke la forgiveness kandra sungido.
Forgiveness de la zosol
Zoso.
zosol zopasolwa migi ngato migi ta ngato migi la quenchenen tini tanga shabana roche lagroa zopasolwa zosol indu ke chembore ngato kunjin zopa masolna kunjin chigiroa kunjin de inate शायद 지디지 tumbo 영예요 말와 또 경험이 레이 왕게 공부 기그리 제당 기그리 게 갖돌라 야다전진 셈나 건지 맞아제 지디지라 샤파시 저슬지 샤이나 양 tumbo 차르고로 저슬도 빼 민수 깨침 버다.
So I just asked Geshe-la how exactly to say forgiveness in Tibetan, and so he answered that that's zer, which is like zerpa, patience, zersol. So
건지 맞아제 다 건지 맞아제 셈 네가 tumbo 줘야 되다 저슬제니.
but really what it comes down to is letting go of resentments, burying, the past, the burying the axe, so to speak, just letting past things go, letting go of things that have brought forth unharmonious situations and really letting them go, coming to make amends. And because if you don't do that with someone, let's say there's been a spat or something has happened and someone is holding resentment, then you'll really never get along. Things will really not be harmonious. So due to our previous karmas and so forth, we might get angry with someone or have hatred in a particular situation. Something might arise where we get angry or have, generate some hatred towards someone or a situation. But when we hold on to that for a longer period of time, that really turns into resentment. And if we can let that go and make amends, then we're able to once again be together harmoniously and get along. But if we hold resentment, if we don't have forgiveness and we hold resentment, then there'll always be bad blood, so to speak.
겨울무치 유럽인이나 아리나 간제 겨울무치 모셔봤지기. 그래서 김정희 냠도 다 김제스데다 가르제 장버진 되더라. 아니 지금 모터도 파니요. 지금 모터도 주니요. 권이 동두 개도. 크라시도 car.
Motor gap.
모터 동두제네. 아니 지들 모터지 마다여서 말아. 지들 미산 또 수다가 인상 모터 망보였지. 아니 미산지 겨들 답했다가 모터데 차와 인상 앞에 갈래어와. 아니 거기 미데 통당 컨트롤하게 있어라. 니 마마보 컨트롤한데네. 아니 니어지 코 삼로 코도. 다두 젠드랑 아주 니가 빼 수디찌네 되고래. 다코 통디기라 nga 컨트롤하디가라. nga 균 기분민도 다가 코에서 손데 같이 짱마 셰샤고스. 아니 코 손데 다 그런 빼 미산 야보래. 저는 모टा 망보여래. 강알 요마래. nga nguni motachi mada yomare te chapare nga pe kyong chumbara sons kenan tongda nga kontro zake dus ina nga zun posani mindu nen ta karse ore tambar di nala ma nga zo kadi na tongde gre tirin zu de nga zun ni petta ka chambo ji pinja nga mana jinchen de gos ta nga kyong ra re kyong ra na te kepra mindu ta petta ka dus che de ni niga kache che ne 저술지 니가 가자지 짱마 주셔도가라 샘데 15기분 두스 상이 코토나 콘도 자야래 샘다 니로 두고두스 소소세 야르무제 코 지도 오테 forgiveness 제나 펜도 된디었다 간체 가자 마셔나 용야 미도 콘진진데나
So His Holiness tells a story. Geshe-la doesn't remember if this particular event took place in Europe or in America, but anyways, there was a family. There was a family, and one of the members of the family took the car out. So they had one car. And one of them was out driving it, and they crashed it and totaled it. And actually, they got they got out of their car. They were really angry at the other person, and were just so angry. And this is because we have only one car in our house. This is the only car, and now you've caused me to crash it. The whole family is going to have a problem. So there was bad blood between these two people, the two people involved in the crash, and there was resentment. And because actually there was resentment for this person who was driving the one family car, really resented the whole situation and the other party involved. And because of all that resentment, they weren't happy. They just couldn't find any happiness, any, rest. And so, the other family, the other person who crashed the car, everyone had their own car. So them crashing their own car didn't really put the whole family at risk. But he just wasn't happy. He couldn't find any rest and any happiness. And so he went to the other person and said, you know, my car got totaled and it's the only car we have. You all have your own car, so it wasn't as big of an inconvenience, but it, you know, the car is totaled and it impacts all of us. And I got really angry. And it's my fault. I got really angry, but that's the reason I got angry. But really, we need to be like brothers again. I want to make amends and let's clean this up. And I want to be like buddies again. And so they did. They sat down, they talked about it. He explained why he flipped out and got angry, and really kind of cleaned up the bad blood and the, you know, between them. And actually, and as His Holiness comments, that sometimes when a situation like this comes up, like with this anger that happened, they had this big fallout, it actually ended up bringing them closer together. And so they became very, very close. All the resentment was dropped and they became very close. So in this case, because of forgiveness, there was forgiveness and dropping of any resentment. It actually ended up to be, you know, very good. They were very harmonious and even brought even closer together. But this isn't going to happen if you have resentment and don't have forgiveness.
Forgiveness pokele girna si khashi yondo khabre. Jurmanda manda yondo khabre. Zopa solwa zopa tanwa khun sanwa indi yongri.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there, you know, it's hard in Tibetan we have this word in English, forgiveness. Tibetan doesn't really have one particular way to say it, but they have the clearing, like to the Tibetan terms that would mean to cleanse away or to drop any resentment, to be forbearing and patient. So there's a few different ways to show patience, a few different ways to say it, but no one perfect way. They have a few different sayings.
Yeah.
Should we start now?
I have a quick question first. Would anyone like to volunteer to lead the prayers in English today?
I can read them if there's no one else that would like to. Is it? Anyone else? If you have, I know that Doug puts it up on the screen, but also I'm happy to read them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diane.
Sanje chedan soki chanam la chanchu parto vani kyapsun page jinzo gebe sonam dola penjire sange ndo parash sanje chedan soki chanam la chanchu parto vani kyapsun page jinzo gebe sonam dola penjire sange ndo parash Sangye chedon soke chanam la chanchu pardo dani kyaksunche Page jinso gebe sonam dola panjara sangye ndo parasho Sangye chedon soke chanam chanchu pardo dani kyaksunche Page jinso gebe sonam dola panjara sangye ndo parasho Simchen thamche dewa tan lewe kyu tan dambarak Simchen thamche dongal tang dongal ji gyo tang tawarak. Simchen thamche dongal mepe dewa tang mindawarak. Simchen thamche nyirin chadang nidang tawarak. Tang nyamla nepara kyuruchi. Simchen thamche dewa tang dewe gyo tang dambarak. Simchen thamche dongal tang dongal ji gyo tang tawarak. Simchen thamche dongal mepe dewa tang mindawarak. Simchen thamche nyirin chadang nidang tawarak. Nyamla nepara kyuruchi, simchen thamche dewa tang dewe gyu tang dambarak. Simchen thamche dongal tang dongal gi gyu tang tawarak. Simchen thamche dongal mepe dewa tang mindawarak. Simchen thamche nyirin chadang nidang tawarak. Panyamlan Ebarakuchi. Simjan Tamje, Devatan, Leve Gutan, Dembarakuchi, Simjan Tamje, Dungan Tan, Dungan Gutan, Tawari. Simjan Tamje, Dungan Mebe, Devatan, Mindawakuchi, Simjan Tam, Nirin Chatan, Nidan, Panyamlan Ebarakuchi. Sajibioji.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground, spread with incense, strewn with adorned flowers, Mount Meru, the four continents, and the sun and the moon, I imagine as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Yadam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryata Yami.
Konge tujingi zungwa tawa tamze pambe chiri tambe chuni tenze pe kodam te la cha za lo. Ta chumden den de nala da ngozo de yun de ya di nala dwa. Di pa chi ya mi cha jin gawa phungsum chobar che. Arang ge semni yong sum du di ni sa ye temba yin zo sum dwa. Ata te kar sum gore. Te suya de ta zu molam ge cham mare ta ngun ngar zo la len ker boye cha gore. Di pa chi ya mi cha jin gawa phungsum chobar che. Arang ge semni yong sum du di ni sa ye temba yin sangi temba se digala che tharum boji pe dugang boji zigbo ji ja tena kan gyur tangir je ene ku ji ja teni jene sangi temba je te mar te jam ji mar e zig gore sangi temba ngone ge kyongi na karcha gona susi yula nyumo wa de gun keru ma chu che nyumo sen de keru ma chu che diba ma che che gewa chijung kare che na pe jorwa ngoji nju kulon chanchuki sem gi zimba ngoji chedi gala mimi gi yentem ni chebaina egawa de changma phum choba chagor oda te chene ene sem de nyomo chola mata je gewe chola khatangina go phum choba chabare teina tate sangi temban zimbi se sangi temban zinzana tere sangi temban nezana te chagor kochugor ese sungor te pe kechimbre do
Mhm. And so when we speak about the teaching of the Buddha, fundamental teaching of the Buddha set forth in the sutras is the statement to thoroughly abandon all non-virtue, perfectly practice virtue, thoroughly tame your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And so when it comes to actually taking up the practice of being a Buddhist, of Buddhism, it's not about just reading the words of the Buddha or reading all of the commentaries and placing a statue and arranging a shrine, but it really does come down to working with our own minds, working with the negative emotions in our own minds, in a way that we work with eliminating the negative emotions so that we are not committing negativity. And that's the first step. And secondly, then we look to virtue, that second line. So the first line was to completely abandon all non-virtue. So we do that again by eliminating negative emotions that bring us to commit negativities. And then secondly, then there was the perfectly practiced virtue, that second line. And what this means is that to really thoroughly have virtue perfected in a way that the three steps of the preliminary step, the main action of the virtue itself, and then the conclusion of the virtue are all in place. And while doing good, while committing virtue, also to embrace the mind of bodhicitta. And in embracing bodhicitta, the wish to benefit others while committing this virtue while doing good deeds, then one has made sure that this action is free from any mistakes, free from any faults, and is very, very authentic. When we embrace bodhicitta and have those three steps present, then this is very authentic virtue. And so that's what is meant by that second line. And so it really comes to, and then of course, tame your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So it really does come down to not just having an aspiration and having the right things set up and read the right, books and scriptures. It's really about actually taking it on.
zungalgi gyu eni pe dipate pangur dipate machende gore sede ta lendi tikjabere kopate ta kanche dipachana dibu zungal nyungore zungal dugu mena ko dipachi gyo mareze ke lapchate kyungore tingin jibudwa.
So then why not? Why not? Why do we have to avoid committing non-virtue? So that first line, completely abandon all non-virtue. Why shouldn't we do wrong things? Why shouldn't we be involved in negativity and harm and so forth? Well, the answer is that negativity leads to suffering consequences. It will bring you suffering, and you don't want suffering, right? Of course not. And so if you want to avoid suffering, then you need to avoid the causes. You need to abandon the causes of that suffering, which is negative action or non-virtue. That is the cause of our suffering. So if we want to bring our suffering to a stop, to an end, then we need to eliminate the cause, which is non-virtue. And that's the reason why the Buddha has this first line, completely abandon all non-virtue. It's because if, we don't want to suffer.
다들 어니 그 풍숨 초바제가 유전 가려 가르치는 거 풍숨 초바제가 그래서 결혼 돼야 돼 대화도 그거 왔어 대화도 그 왔지니 이거 말도 대 그와 짱마지 풍숨 초바제잖아 대화도 용거래 결혼 되는데 두 그래 대 맞아봐 있나 애니페 용서 초바제 뚝 투여 말했어 배난 돈 떨어지 때베나 사추 애니페 그 share 망부신 점구도 하지 유대 깽니까 망부신 소발 때는 끼기로 와서 때는 좀 분좀 소박에 와이나 즉 뭐지 연한 주매와 주연한 뭐지 매와 근데 때는잖아 용에 장마지 끼고 말해 맞아 내가 양 답아진다 봐라 내가 분숨 소바 양 답아지 째고래스 분숨 쳐다데 굴롱 잔주기 샘기진 굴롱 양 답아 뭐지 애니페 가와 주디가라 미미비 겐 때문에 타르 모아져야 돼. 저는 주숨 미미비 겐 때문에 라지메 바 똥방이 최담제 랑기 즉 가와딘 가자져야 돼. 똥바 가소래 가자랑신기 두베 똥와 점버베 똥 유말타고 텐데지 미제네 삼나데 제바이나 티니 분숨 서바 잘 거래. 때나 견나 용야 내야 내와데 다바지라 그래 라고 인지부도 와 왔다 때인도 갈라 맞아 배메시가 개와 세대 분 소바지고 장마지고 하다 타르도나 장마 아버지 라고 하다 너도나
라.
소바지다 개와 장마 아버지 배 강가 유견 용서 소바 창와지 이정은 주숨 창와지 제세 라고 하래 대내 기부 용그래 라고 하래 대화 용그래
And then the second line is to perfectly practice virtue. And so then why do we need to do that? You might ask why. Why is that important? Well, it's because we want happiness. We all want to be happy, right? And so if one wishes to be in favorable circumstances and be happy and comfortable, then we need to find the way to accomplish that which we want, that happiness which we want. And that is to perfectly accomplish virtue. And so if we don't perfectly accomplish virtue, then we will not be able to get the happiness that we want. So for example, in order for a crop to grow, you need to perfectly have certain conditions in place, the correct basis for the plant to grow in. You need water, you need warmth and sun and so forth. If some of these factors are missing, then you won't get the fruition of the blooming plant. And so in the same way, if we want the fruition of happiness, then we need to have all of the right conditions in place. And these can be subsumed into three steps or three parts. And the first part is a preliminary step, which is the first thing, which is to have the motivation for why one is doing what they're doing. And the perfect motivation is bodhicitta. It's the altruistic attitude, to do it for good reason, for altruistic reasons. And that's the first step. And so if you have bodhicitta, really doing it because you care that it brings about goodness and benefit for others, then you have the authentic first step. So you have now, we're talking about perfectly accomplishing virtue. Now you have the perfect first step. And then secondly is the main part of while you're doing the main action, the main conduct of this goodwill, of this action. And so how to have this be perfect is that while one is engaging in an activity, to see that there is no true intrinsic existence within the situation, to see it as illusion-like, not as a fixed, true, solid reality of an agent and an action and a receiver and so forth, but to see the illusory-like nature, the lack of intrinsic existence in any of that, and still do the action. That is now perfectly accomplishing, perfectly engaging in that second step. And so, and thirdly, then to conclude is to dedicate. The perfect conclusion is to dedicate any merit that has been generated to all others, give it away, dedicate it for the purpose of others. And so now you have these 3 steps complete. And this is what the Buddha meant by this second line, perfectly accomplished virtue. Through perfectly accomplished, with those 3 steps, you now have authentic virtue that will bring about authentic happiness. So authentic happiness will follow. And ultimately, when we talk about perfectly accomplished virtue, it means having all of those things complete, all of those factors or steps complete. And then it's sure that perfect and authentic happiness will follow. La yanke chikonda.
제발에 대화 중와
Uh-huh.
자와지 제네와 아니 셈네 기보다 떠난다 들이 연구여나 띠게 와레스 아니 로즈르 네베고네 자와지 자와띠 제비티니 교바진지다 텔티니 아니 베 수선 리부데 동아이케 두인징기여나 디다 나추레스 제발에 대화 중와 가르치기 팅이스 중요하래 가래 야와근든 두기 세마리 연습에 세미 중지하래 어딘 순간에 제발에 대화 중와 가르치기 팅이 제발에 대화 중와 가르치기 팅이
Okay. And so conduct can fall into 2 categories, virtuous conduct and non-virtuous conduct, or what is sometimes called white or light deeds, or black or dark deeds, which would be the dark, and black would be the negative deeds, and the white and light would be the virtues. And so how do we define how can we differentiate in between virtuous conduct and non-virtuous conduct? And so there's one logician in a text on logic and reasoning where it is defined as virtue is anything that when a conduct brings about a pleasant and happy result, brings about happiness, then this is virtue.
That 나부 미교일레기 생기서도 미스 미교의 취기 생기서도 미세 통마선데 다 단다딜라 고아 자든 리바다나 제발에 동안 중아 나취기 생기잖아 민디야케 민도아 제발에 대화 중아 가르치기 생 제발에 동안 중아 나취기 생기세데.
So even without reading an actual definition, the actual definition of reading and saying these words, we can understand already from the definition of virtue, what the definition of non-virtue would be. Any conduct that, any conduct that brings about an unfavorable or suffering result would be one of these non-virtues or dark deeds.
어떻게 윤도 삼당과다 대차고랑 알아서 지금 그와서 디가라 소소진데 지배 소소진도 근데 네 구승 두든지 디가라 주집에 남아지지 윤도 센나라 아니 배 제바전에 아니 배 녀몽께로 맞지 가서 두두지나 민공기요 말아대 지 마주에서 지 넘바 철거로 말 뭐는 저는 되는 말에 맞아 균도 소시 마오벤 디불레 미네 아니 디부 대화던 등이네 아니베 장주기 셈기 짐베고네 답에 미미비 겐데미 지제나 때 최방은 남자도 차거래 그 땡기 중도 연나로 맨나로 때 최방 남자 차거래 맞지 자와타 상기 이송야데 때 가르순 거래 장주기 셈되기 전전제데 순거로 ran cinzin le nyambol ten yade ran che pranzimi cinzin de la nyambol ten ne e jen che pranzimi cinzin de kompel to tayale chanju gi sem da tini zembarnzimi denzin de kaya thapjela songbani dirwa shedam je songbani ranjingi me ba ani sen zamot tendel tenjin de war juwa se yade zembarnzimi denzin de la nyambol ten yarwa 이게 가르쳐 거래 맞아 답에 타르투나데 투상 얼마 미개와 강가장인데 땡이 차대요 인자 땡이를 빼 매어서 와야 땡이 매어서야라 장주기 셈당 벤진당 란진지 매어서야라 장주기 셈당 자문동방이 땡진 레원 중 땡이 인자 땡이 타지도 가르쳐도 오유 가르치다나 가르쳐 와 and dibude karpojin jingidwa oda tartuna nakpo tisade ran jinjinda zembarbe denzin dikniche karpo tise jizade karre jinche branzimbe janjugi sendang zamotombani tenjin dewan juma tating tajidu karpo tiche chagdoa ting moto yabo jungwa de permiso ke chambore
So there's something here now that is very, very crucial that you are introduced to. And so first we have to remember, and it's very useful and helpful to constantly remember that what the Buddha said, the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha said that we should constantly look at the state of our mind. And actually, it's not just, for example, when we're sitting in meditation in front of a beautiful statue in a shrine room that we need to keep ourselves virtuous and good conduct, or maybe only when people are looking, then we do the right thing. That's actually a misunderstanding. That is not the way to practice the words of the Buddha. But what we have to remember is that our own future happiness, your own future happiness, really depends on your constantly checking the state of your mind and whether or not you have good intentions and bodhicitta at all times. Always be thinking to be in a state of doing what you are doing for the purpose of benefiting others, whether someone is watching or not. And that's really what the Buddha said. The Buddha said that, the Buddha spoke about the altruistic attitude, the wish to benefit others. That's bodhicitta, really cherishing others. So we could call it other cherishing rather than self-cherishing. So the Buddha said that we should cherish others and have bodhicitta, and also in order to counteract our fixation on a true and substantial reality, the Buddha taught emptiness. The Buddha taught that all phenomena are empty of any self-nature, and all phenomena are interdependent. They are codependent. And so really it comes down to these two things ultimately. These two things ultimately self-cherishing, and the fixation to a true and substantial reality are what bring about all those non-virtues. That's what brings about all of these dark or negative deeds. And so we need to rectify this situation. And how do we rectify that? We rectify that with just what the Buddha taught, with bodhicitta that counteracts the self-cherishing, and with the understanding and view of understanding of our surroundings, our outer material world, and all things, all phenomena as empty of any intrinsic existence, and that they are interdependently connected phenomena. They are all codependent. Actually, ultimately, if we do this, if we operate with those two worldviews, with those intentions and worldview, then this is what brings about all of the virtuous conduct, or the light or white conduct. This is what brings about all of the virtue. So we eliminate the cause of non-virtue, which is self-clinging and clinging to a true reality, by thinking about others and having bodhicitta, and always remembering, constantly remembering, that which we experience ultimately is empty and interdependent. And it's very, very important to have an introduction to this, to be introduced to these things.
Gewa sidgala, karpo gewa sidgala, janju gisem taw. Na gyaur mjende sungdo. Jopa tsewa mepa, tawa tenjung zede sungdo. Jopa tsewa mepa yongya ki jizade. Janju gisem jiza konobo ninjiri. Ninji gyule yona tsewa suchile ke yomar thana. Indikala chik ngazo nangpe chuen to rilde chena. Jopa tsewa mepa tal tawa tenjung nin tu diware. Ta jopa tsewa mepa seya de la ma duna pali jungni sheba najin suna jenla ne mache sedigala si denala pali ki jopi jung de chasang dine di diware. Ta ne mache ugala jenla penpa ta gore sedigala 다 날렌dragi 시중기 중기 때 대바침비 중기 다 접이 차상되니 주디하래 접발에 다 눈에 니르다 위교나 니레 이제는 내 맞지 세야다 내 너바 맞지베 간라 펜바다고래 세야지 띵인지 띵 맞아 윤도 셈나 장과도 뺀 미스베 개침보래 나랑서 수이나 더마당 가서 칸이 인지 보지랍 아니 파가 제가 나간 로디가라 갑자기 콜로 차기도 와. 다른 셈는 꿈디 말레베 따라와. 즉 셰게라 닝지부지 셰 두그레데 꿈디 메나고 장차여자 장교도 셰셰 걸어와. 로디가라 딱만 수수 가르쳐 버려. 라렌도 마다리 인자 콜로 차기.
So we start with a very, very fundamental and important thing to understand, which is to differentiate. How do we know what's virtuous? How do we know what's non-virtuous? First, before we can avoid them, we need to know how to classify them. What makes something virtuous? What makes something non-virtuous. So we really have to look at the foundation of both of those things, the cause, what causes them to be virtuous and non-virtuous. And so what really leads us into non-virtue are the two things that we are looking to rectify. And one of them is having a really strong sense of self-identity and clinging to that self-identity and really cherishing and caring mostly about oneself, oneself as the center of the universe and so forth. And then secondly, seeing things as true and real, really taking things very personally and as very, very true and real. And we can see that these two things are really the foundation of what causes us to develop feelings such as attachment and desire, possessiveness, hatred and anger, aversion. And therefore, these, our responses then are that of a very emotional response, negative emotional response that bring us suffering. And that is all based on our that foundation of coming from a place of strong self-identity and really caring about one's own agenda, indifferent to others, but focused on one's own agenda and really focused very firmly and that everything is so solid and real. And so if you can break these two things down and eliminate and work on these, then you have the tools to avoid actions and thoughts that you don't want arising in yourself. So you have a way to work with the internal landscape. And that's very, very important because we want to avoid all non-virtue. So the path of Buddhism, it's said that the path of Buddhism is, and His Holiness speaks about this, very much is focused in two areas. The first one being non-harming. The second one, having an understanding of one's reality, understanding that our reality is a dependently arising reality. Everything is relative. And so first we start with that first one, non-harming. And so this non-harming really works to counteract that is cherishing attitude that oneself is the center of the universe, because with non-harming, this comes from a compassionate attitude. When we have compassion and empathy, then whoever it is that's suffering or has difficulty will be focused on their suffering and their needs and really care about that, whoever they are. And that's very, very important. And then we have, again, along with holding that understanding of the view of our surroundings, this world and its surroundings as interdependent. And so there are two traditions, actually. So when we talk about this non-harming and compassion, we have both the Pali tradition and the Nalanda tradition. And it's the Pali tradition that focused very strongly, and all the teachings of the Pali tradition really fall into this compassionate means, this path of non-harming. And in the Nalanda tradition, so in other words, the Pali tradition says, do no harm to others. That's the focus. And then the Nalanda tradition takes it one step further. That says, not only should we do no harm to others, but we should help others. And so all of the scriptures and practices of the Nalanda tradition are based on this bodhicitta, on this altruism, to act for the purpose and benefit of other sentient beings. And so these are the two things that we really need to train whoever we are, whoever it is, as human beings, as people in this world. These are the two things this is what we really need to train our mind in. do no harm to others, and on top of that, act to help them. And so, and this is really sincerely from the bottom of one's heart, one should look to generate a caring for others, loving kindness towards others, really a concerned care for others. Not like when one might say something nice to the person when you're face to face, but the moment they walk away, you're rolling your eyes and saying, oh my goodness, get a clue or something, just really going back to something very negative mindset. But and if one were to do that, for example, you may be able to hold it together and say the right thing and be nice to someone when they're there. But as soon as they're not in front of us or on the phone anymore, we're, rolling our eyes and saying something nasty about them. That's a sign that we haven't really trained our mind. We're not really, there yet with our full compassion and empathy and so forth. And so really, really important that we learn to identify virtue and non-virtue, and then see what leads us down that road, either to virtue or non-virtue, and then work with those methods that help us train in virtue. La Guinyan.
Oh, Kenyan.
Okay. So pena di jangdom dang
Marta ngazo kimpa Kenyan ki domba lengora. Labji jiam nga chini jiam nga kan lendiora kan kalone.
So
Kenyan sigdoa. Karlabor Kenyan zene.
And so we have these, many people have taken vows, for example, the householder vows, and one has taken the vows to uphold, be it 1 or 2, up to 5 of these different precepts. And so when we talk about these householder vows, what is it that we have taken up? Does Dirabegeshla?
Gawalinya goro Kenyan sidiga. Chaza Kenyan sidiga gawalinya wasigor. Gawa sidiga gawa tharbala jane. Inin te domba de lena tharbala tharbatule linya chagores. Tharbatu sidiga tharbakare. Leda nyumo zebe thar leda nyumo namdole. Te da tole teba tombani tu zeber gabar gurze sumudo. Esa kaje gawa sidgala nyumo zebe zechayan gopala jay. Yani tharbala jaya. Tini ore.
So we talk about
Domba ngor dombe kwa domba genyin sevedi si kwa de malebna tel tronang de leg marwa. Domba len shane pendo marwa de len masuna.
And so when we take the vows, so actually in Tibetan, so this question is more based in the Tibetan term for what it means to take the householder vows. And what so we have ge nyen, and ge is virtue. And like gewa is that word that we've been talking about for virtue. And then nyen is to aspire to virtue. That's what it means in Tibetan. That's how the etymology of the Tibetan word is to aspire to virtue. And so Geshe-la's question was, so what do we aspire to when we take the householder vows? And he's answered that question. He said, what this means is to aspire to virtue, which means to aspire to liberation. And so there is that quote also in regard to aspiring to virtue that, or to, in the Root Verses of the Middle Way by Nagarjuna, where he defines, so what is liberation? In regard to liberation, liberation is the complete exhaustion of karma and the afflictions. Gedang Yangkir Chik
zebet le tang nyomong zebet tar le tang nyomong namtole teta trepale sombani tunga parkirus.
And so that is liberation is the complete exhaustion of karma and the afflictions. Karma and the afflictions and that which proliferate from them are all come to cease through realizing emptiness. That's the quote, and that quote is also up in Slack and Facebook. And so that's actually what we're aspiring to, is liberation. And liberation is the complete exhaustion of karma and the afflictions. And they will, that and all that proliferate from them will all come to an end through a realization of emptiness. And so in that quote, it says that liberation is the complete exhaustion of karma and the afflictions. And what is meant here specifically is the non-virtuous karma. It is the non-virtuous karma that needs to be exhausted, not the virtuous karma. And without the complete exhaustion of non-virtuous karma, there is no freedom, there is no liberation.
Dewa uyana di yude inji minji tu gorwa ngazo sun jenda jitep dibu be sunde suben temne dibu kushu egrewa gana rewa to tongbarwa katsawa jikegre yani katsawa jmada
Sun robe sun sul
sun sapun
sun oh sabun
sabun de ta karatam na te dibu de ten te dibu sabun ngarme enbe niba yogyo jitebe na ngarmo kigre sawi niba yogyo jina sawa kigirwa 내가 나진지 맞아 대관도 그에나 사분데 개와 배 간지 개와지 수술에 교반매야지 타나 다르도나 교반매야지 니부 둥알 민징 긴지 인지 미지 땅보니 대지고 와래 제발에 대화주와 가르치기 생이 이 세마리게는 배 살포였다 세마리 베겐 yawa gandun rupta yawar mujhe kudan dang podre tatti thi tela kwa gena na bi chugi thingi tela chepale dungan junga na chugi thingi zana devung do tatti ngazo yundu te samnadane ani ta susu dungal gugundu ge rewa gugundu te samnadane ta susu lalentariare.
And so again, the definition of happiness, that, or the definition of virtue, that which brings about, that action which brings about happiness is virtue. And so if we want that happiness, then we need to gather the cause for that happiness. And the same way that if we want a particular fruit, then it's that the seed of that plant that we need to get, that we need to plant. And so if we so some plants are sweet and some plants are more bitter and spicy. And if we want to experience a sweet fruit, then we need to plant that which will grow the sweet fruit. And if we want to have a spicy fruit, then we need to plant the seed that will bring about the spicy fruit. And in the same way, if we want to experience the fruition of happiness, then we need the seed for that. And the seed for that is virtuous action. Action done with the wish to benefit others. And so again, or that virtue, if we want happiness, then we need to accomplish that virtuous action that brings about happiness. And this is spoken about in the text on logic by the first Dalai Lama, the Gendun Drup. So through the first Dalai Lama, Tawa Gendun Drup, in this text on logic, where he really spoke about the differentiation between virtue and non-virtue. And again, non-virtue is any action that brings about difficulty and suffering. And so with that, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to be happy, or do we want to suffer? Do we want to be in a good situation, or do we always want to be in catastrophes and difficulties? So that's what we have to ask ourselves, and then conduct ourselves accordingly. And this really correlates very well here with where we left off in the text. So in the text, so we've been examining 5 points, 5 objections that the lower schools brought to the Prasangika, and the Prasangika counter those objections. And unless we really, so in this 4th point, it has everything to do with the distinctions between suffering and virtue and non-virtue. And so without first identifying virtue and non-virtue, it would be hard to kind of get a grasp on the debate that's going on here, where we're picking up in the text.
Uma Tanjure, Ranji Meba Shebate, Kena Ranji Mezena, Yumi Kibusena, Sebalasova, Liba Yungure Yungmare, that Zugore, Uma by Dode Padancheta Mawala Soba, take it, that Tanjual, Tezugore. The Yuma Sidigala, they ought to get Lendigi Stanahagura. Yuma Sidigala. Tengi yore, pegi yumada, tengi yuma nyungorwa. Tengi yumade, ta lenong yumata buuse de tawala jane shigdoa, pake jetobe, ta nangyongdugala, chutamje zembar madub jang, yulungwene madub na yena, eni pe nangyakala, jetobe nandugala, pe yulungwene yobajin nangiorwa. Like who Zembar Mebada Kui Jetobati Nyon de Oroa or the TG. Be Yumade, Tang Yuma Ken Sidugala, Yuma Dungi Yorwa, Kanje, Paku, Matang, Zedang, any Tadan Lampochella Tape, Rijawa Kangi, Ninjabush, then Mabutu to Borwa. Biggie Yumadre.
Lasso.
These Digala can a Simjin Yumal to be Simjin Sena, Riba Yungure Yungumare Sidigala, that language Digala City, Chikan Tambunigi, can peggy Yumal Tabuina, they Riba Yungumares. Kaje, pay Yumal Tabu Sena, Yumi Simjin Sebaina, that Tadanambulu Tucha de Sena, de la Soyo Mares, de la Nipe. Diba yung mares te link ya gore sigan tangbunyi digi Tigan Chimani Digi, or then song Yumatobi, that Simjin Sena, Diba Yunguritella Soyor was the Lente Tijagorda. Ninjua, Tangulang, Yumi, Ibu Sesola, Semichina, Diba Me Sedua. Yuma, that piggy Yumadreda. Mazo Yuma Kengi, Yuma Tulje, Tadalang, Tadang Palangla Sobatende Tulje, this is Sebina Diba Yomaris. Cola Soyo.
Temo young ani temo ngato pena temo young ani peg you sigi yona.
Re dangazo longing in ala ngazo semjin yung nangidoa. Nana de senata longing zonijirata. It's big yumadre. Della semio marwas, semeinza, codiba yomare, selengabre. Ah, Yumisandal Dembala said the Sidua. Yumisandal Dembala, Sonamtani di Banjungs, Yumisim, Ranji Mepe, Neping on any Ranji Mepaton the Gengi, Kazaki, any Tindawaji, Yumi, Yan Simjin Sebaina, any Dipa Yungri, any Tele Pempatana, Deva Yungris, Sonam Sagris. Cardinal Lengagdo.
Oh, lasso.
The Gopate, the Otic Chikan the Tingerwa.
Yes.
Ranjim Mepata, Tingi Yuma, Ranjim Mebangebi, Tila, Semjindela Soyorwa. Sonam saw what the Tela Soy beach is the Labdorta. You isn't got Koya the Ninjibdoa. Again, Pig Yumatala, soil, Marso in my inza, got the bio mares,
So now we look at virtue and non-virtue. And also we have been investigating the difference in the view of the Prasangika Madhyamakas and the lower school. So the Prasangikas posit that there is no self-nature in phenomena, that all phenomena lack self-nature and are like illusion. And so then the lower schools then say, then bring up the point and ask about, well, if things have no self-nature, then is there any negativity to kill one of these illusion-like beings? If beings are illusion-like, then it's not logical to say there's any negativity in killing them. We already discussed earlier about the virtue in making offerings and so forth. But at this point, it's about, is there any negativity in killing them? And that's where we're going to be picking up in our text in chapter 9, in verse 11. And so before we look at the actual words of verse 11, we must make a distinction between the difference of a magical apparition and an illusion-like being. And so, for example, illusion-like beings, this is what the Prasangikas have been speaking about, that phenomena and beings have no real true nature, but they are illusory like. And so this is talking about, for example, we get up from our meditation seat and we go about our daily activities. All that appears to us post-meditation in our experience appears as if it is real and solid and actual. And this is the point where the Prasangikas are saying when you examine it further, you will see that there is no realness to it or to the other beings that we come in contact with. And so this is the one of those categories of appearances, of illusory-like appearances. But then there are magical apparitions, such as things that can come about, like a mirage, when the desert is dusty and hot and the light hits just right and it looks like something is there and there's not. Or, for example, you might see on a street corner in India with a yogi doing a magic spell and an incantation and has all the right substances, and suddenly there is a magical apparition that appears. Or a modern day example of that which we see on a movie projector, a screen. It's a magical apparition. And so that's important that we know these two categories. And so the answer the Prasangikas give here is in verse number 11. So the question is would there be a negativity if one were to kill a mirage or a magical apparition or so forth? So the Prasangikas say, if thus I were to slay a harm, a mere mirage, because there is no mind, no sin occurs. So these are these things that we would see in a movie, in a projection, in a street corner, in a mirage where the sun has hit things the wrong way and it looks like something is there and it's not really there. There is no mind that exists. There is no life force that really exists in that illusion. And so Prasangikas say, no, there is no negativity that would be accrued. However, and then in the next line, the third line, but beings who are possessed of mirage-like minds, sin and merit will in consequence arise. So again, in that post-meditative state, our state where we are going about in the world, although beings are illusion-like, there is a life force there. There is a mind there. So be it virtue, if one were to help a illusion-like sentient being, virtue is accumulated. If one were to harm them or kill them, non-virtue is accumulated. So maybe we take our break here. Everyone, 5 or 10 minute break and we come back. I think that means yes, Geshe-la. Well,
Oh,
it's okay to take a break now, everyone? Yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
5-10 minutes both, and then 15. Yeah. Hi. 다시를 배네. 다시 말해. 고구민도. 예, 다시. 다시. 오, 준비성도 왜? 저기스탄. 징기스탄. 음.
Geshe-la.
Oh,
The Panadi Gyuma gi Sempe Nangla Pena Dene Sok Yuna Dene Sem Yuna Dikwasak.
oh, that is.
Shungito. Di Che Papo La Sem Yotsang Young Mena Di Yul La
Yula.
Sem Yula.
That's a papa chana, pagi yuma tu papo de kibucha di orwa.
Lasso. Okay.
Yul yuma the pig yuma de yul del jawar.
Lasso. Okay. Di
Huh?
Lapsarian.
Oh, that tungi yuma de sim karsore. Tungi yuma de rajim me pa de song yuma tabu drwa. De song yuma tabu simjit sena, tele pentana, rewan jungre. They sell tele nekena dipan jungres. Kaza te tela ani pe koso yor was te lendi kabre.
So I was just clarifying. I don't know if everyone is back, but I was clarifying with Geshe-la. So we're speaking about because whether it's a magical apparition, then no real virtue or non-virtue occurs. But if there is a being that has an illusion-like mind, so I wanted to differentiate, is it because the person who does the action has the mind that the virtue occurs, or because the object of that action has the mind? And Geshe-la, and so I think, and that's the way that I translated it, that the object, the being has a mind that is killed, a life force that is taken. That's why, and Geshe-la confirmed that that's the case. I just wasn't sure if it was on the agent or the subject or the object, and it's the object.
Tadun te yo tene tönyo kore sal chagre.
Yeah. And so the important part to be clear on is, whether it's someone with a mirage-like or apparition, or an illusory being. That's the real difference. That's where you get your clarity on whether or not there is going to be a virtue or a non-virtue.
Ami kanga levi na.
Is everyone back?
Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha. So I have an alternate, while we're waiting, I have an alternate translation. It's just a little different, but I thought I could read it here for verse number 11. If one kills or harms the magical illusion of a man, there is no mind in such a thing, and therefore there's no sin. But beings do indeed have mirage-like minds. Sin and merit will, in consequence, arise.
I think we can probably start again when.
Yeah, okay. 와다 다티 주고들라 디도 마선나라 니미치르 유메스니 주어메 식스도 답베 유마테기 랭 베 유마들라 셈메비 유젠데 시고래 셈메비 유젠데 아나 나타 다 유마켄기 유마툴리온데가라 고 둘지 디우싱당 징부당 제당 나당 미레파당 때는 망보신 좀데 그 유마데 둘고 와봐 텔레 치카제 텐디 인들 텐디 nga 소바 둘지 디우싱서다 때달라 셈케 긴디바 요마레스 텐자 유메 랑볼라네 셈요마레스 텔랍고다 유마툴 차가데 기들라 셈요마레스 유메 셈니 주아메스 유메티 고 nga다 텐레라 셈주 계획이 니바메인자 고티 용마레스 다 나서 겐린 중화이 유마테야 나서 니세 세디갈라타 땡기 유마데스 거래 덴통 유마타부 라지메파 셈진 세나 이 셈진데 유나솔을 좀 되긴데 유나솔을 좀 인자 디부나솔 기그리스 텔레세미오레스 겐질라니 구니바 가난테니 여마인스 겐지질레 겐데겐지 땡 소니니 여마레스 유다 겐 나솔르테니 tum데겐 세지레스 다테 숨고레 자신이 겟텐데 티리다
So. And now, so resuming and picking up in the text in verse number 12, where it says, there is no power in things like spells, so mirage-like minds do not occur through them. And so here, the power of mantra and incantation and different material substances, and the brain to perceive those, the perceiving eye and so forth, to perceive those, it can bring about an apparition when all of the right things are brought together. The right spell, the right materials and magical substances and so forth can make an appearance of something. So for example, like an elephant, suddenly out of nowhere, an elephant, one sees the appearance of an elephant. But these mantras and so forth do not have the power and ability to imbue that magical apparition with a mind. So that's why it says, so mirage-like minds do not occur through them. But now it says illusions. Okay, so this is this verse shows us those two things, magical apparitions and illusion-like beings. So now here where it says illusions, it refers to beings. Illusions spring from various causes. So sentient beings and illusion-like minds, different illusion-like minds, come from different causes. Thus, illusions are of different kinds, meaning sentient beings are of different kinds. And then next, going into the next verse, a single cause for everything there never was. So sentient beings are diverse and come from a diversity of causes.
다 리선
Jason la.
와다다 대주고데 아빠 근데 니 남이 소설 제바 밑에 밥방 봐세 되래 다 코로와 생양대시야 돼 당보 코로와 시디가라 토메 마리 비켄지 레사네다 토시피스모는 마냥 감쪽게 버도 레당 요모원기 겐데가
카투바투
토시피스모 시제 줌에 카메라다 시제 Tini ma nyakam chuge bardo ta le the nyomongi kore kim de the la croasi gorde. Le the nyomongi rwa. Nyangde sidigala ta karsa kore. Ne jengi diksun. Nyangende nyomong le chine. Nyangende nyomong le chine. Telin de paas. Nyangan sidigala ngazo I dunga I sem magibade la yundu nyangan lagu rwa. O ku nyangan ku pe na zazan raji da pama raji tromba ina midu semdu jige rwa. Didi garlar ko to nyangan sun yore si nyangan pe semdu yore pama tromson re pingya tromson re ani puputu tromson re se de kaji tangi de yorwa. Kachezang nyangan sidigala ko tosu sem maki pam tendijila dungal tangenjila nyangan sigora tanda nyang de sini nyangan de nyomong le chegores nyomong to dungal kanga tangen de nyomong chegora telen de pa sidigala ta nyang de sidigala to nyang de la tondam nyang de lubur tijal ge nyang de side at ni chegore
Ani pama ki kola kare sumpela.
pama
Wadang.
wadang puputu tongson zazan rona sem ta tongendala de yomata desha gyoto zola semdu yungorwa dedi nyangin sung sigdo nyangan chiba ko nyangan thoyore ze lagdo dungal wada kanje nyangan sido magi bajirwa ma karchi yaga machunga jila nyangan sigore ne yengi de nyang de nyangan de nyomola chegore sam nyomola ole de basi de nyomola tolwa o de indigala nyangan sidigala nyangde sidigala lupur tital ranji namda gi karsa ranji nyangde da lupur tital ge nyangde ni chegorta e ha ko gore ta nyangde ngwe de lupur tital de ramado ranji namde de chedamje le kyap kyap yoro ranji yeyo marwa 당분이 고 덴바르메베 고 투바르 덴바르메베 고 레케바레 켄겐지나 쇼가리나 란지 마두고나 tum데겐진자 고 란지 남다베
Oh, yang kerso de kola.
페나 붐발 타부 두베이남 붐발 타부지난다 다지가 지가 추진 추지간데나 두비온데가나 고 란진 율군의 마두바질 고네 투비어와 인도가나 란진 남다데 최탐적인 내루데 란진 남다데 차디오레 란진 남다 냥데도 최탐적 상라요레 루불 티탈 지디가라 타 뇽몬다 탈와지 구구다 루불 위티마다 탈와지 타 냥데 고마데 문 진사데 테레다
So we've been moving through the 5 points of refutation by the prasangikas of the objections of the lower school. So this section is really about this refutation of these 5 objections. And so now the lower schools are saying, well, if there's no natural true existence to things, then what's all this about the distinction of there being samsara and nirvana? So what is there to this samsara and nirvana? And so now it picks up here in verse number 13. If ultimately you will now inquire, everything is said to be nirvana, samsara, which is relative, must be the same. And so first we look at those terms, samsara and nirvana. So first we look at samsara, or what is the cycle of existence, cyclic existence. And cyclic existence is something that is established through the force of ignorance. And actually, there are many kind of levels of cyclic existence, all the way down from the lowest of realms, all the way up to the highest peak of the top, the higher parts of samsara. It's still cyclic existence. It is still subject to the factors of karma and afflictions, whether it be the lowest depths of the lower realms or the highest peak of the higher realms. It is still subject to and established through karma and the afflictions. And that's samsara. And then we have nirvana. What is the meaning of nirvana? Well, the word nirvana in Tibetan, if we look at the actual etymology of what it means, is nyang de. And nyang is suffering and afflictions and difficulties. And de is to be beyond and go beyond. And so nirvana means to go beyond the suffering and afflictions and beyond karma. And so we're beyond, nirvana is a place where it is beyond all suffering. And what this really means is what makes one unhappy, what brings one unhappiness is the emotions, the negative emotions, destructive emotions. So nirvana means to go beyond destructive emotions. Ultimately, that's what the meaning of nirvana is. However, there is the twofold distinction of nirvana. One is a natural nirvana, and the other is the nirvana that is, it is a state that has transcended all traces and stains. And so natural, and so it's actually this state of nirvana beyond all traces and stains that is the nirvana, that is the nirvana that one is looking to attain. Natural nirvana is something that is possessed by all objects, by all phenomena. For example, be it water or a vase, a vessel of some kind, although it appears in material form, actually its real true existence is beyond all that. It is free of all that. That is like its natural nirvana. It's like natural purity. It's complete purity. It's complete pure nature is its complete pure nirvana. The nature of complete pure nirvana is its pure nature. But when we talk about the state of going beyond all suffering, going beyond all negative, harmful, suffering, emotional states, we're talking about the second kind of nirvana, which is again that nirvana that transcends all traces. So again, nirvana means to go beyond all suffering. And so we have these two distinctions, samsara and nirvana, that are brought up in this verse.
Nyangde Rajin Namta Nyangde Jikje, Lubur Tital Nyangde Niche, Lubur Tital Nyangde Sidigala Nyangde Yomolachini, Telinte, but the Teletolwa says Goguda. That Nyanguma the Chagua. The Rajinamta Chetamjik on the Yamara. Tigicham Coral, Rajinamta Yande, Coral told to Gumido. Tanagazu Yula Maranzo Tuzamine, Nilum Tundegende, Rajinamta Yande Chai or de, Tigi Coral told to Gumido.
And so we have this naturally pure nature, the nirvana of the natural pure nature, and the nirvana of being completely liberated from adventitious stains, that is completely free of traces and stains. And this is the nirvana that we're liberated into, that is liberation, because what this nirvana is and what it means is to be liberated from adventitious stains and traces, meaning free from those is what liberates us. Being free from something that is already naturally pure, nature is not what will liberate us. That isn't freedom for us. The freedom and nirvana that we attain, the freedom we attain, or nirvana we attain, is to be liberated from the adventitious stains of the afflictions.
다 란신 남다기 냥데데기 여비 켄체니 다 디여 인자 디 켄기 루브르 냥데 루브르 디르니 냥데데 투투야 여바지 하고 두도 가르테 간데스 하고라 남델 난 리스노레 셈게 란신 어설와 디만음니 루브르와 아즈 송레
Semgirajin osalwa.
디만음니 루브르와 아즈데 셈게 란신데 디마데 셈게 란신레 주요 마레스 셈게 란신레 마주 인자 딜라 란신 냥데데 여여 마레스 디마데 루브르와 데셀 거레스 다 루브르와 셀네 루브르 메베 차데라 루브르 냥데스 거라 루브르 디달기 냥데스 거라 란신 남다기 냥데 여베 켄제네 루브르 디달기 냥데도 뚝뚝도
So it's based on the existence of the natural, pure nature, the nirvanic, natural, pure nature, that one is able to obtain the nirvana, which is freedom from adventitious stains. And so why is that? How can we understand that? Well, we can look, it was said very nicely in, I believe it was in Pabonka's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hands, when Oh, okay. In this, Dharma Kirtis, stages of Namdra. Okay, in the text on logic, on pramana, logical reasoning, where valid cognition, where the nature of mind, where he said, where Chandrakirti, Dharmakirti, okay, okay, Dharmakirti says that the nature of mind is clear light radiance, and the temporary adventitious stains, the stains are any stain is temporary and adventitious. And so what this means, this actually points out that the nature, that there is a difference. The adventitious stains, the afflictions and defilements, any defilements, he says, have not polluted or stained or tainted the actual mind. The mind is this natural, complete purity. It has not been stained. That which is adventitious can be cleared away. So it points out that there is this natural nirvana, this natural pure nirvana that exists intrinsically. So due to there being that, we understand that the defilements are temporary and they can be cleared away, so that we can be liberated into that nirvana that is free of those stains.
Raji namta ki nyande da nyande ki min to ba je nyande ngwe ma yin. Tate jita de jite hakona teni jugo zoba zosan dan te zo hakure.
And so this nirvana of being free from temporary defilements, from stains and traces of temporary defilements, is the actual nirvana that we seek. This, when we talk about nirvana, this is the nirvana we're speaking about. This natural intrinsic purity in phenomena is called nirvana, is a type of nirvana. It's named nirvana, but it's not the nirvana that means to be liberated from all suffering and freedom and so forth that we seek.
Raji nyande sedigala chetamjegan le kyam deba zorido. Chetamjegan la tomba ni tutu marwa. Tongji da tongji chechen kande jin da de chechen tongni ji ye marwa.
And so this natural, pure, intrinsic nirvana is something that pervades all phenomena. It is the emptiness that is the basis of whatever is examined. It is the underlying emptiness that pervades all. It is the basic nature that pervades all phenomena.
That lubuti ni nyande di chetamjegan la tele pap tu marwa. 인지 민지 기타 배 기부 간사기 셈 기타는 지 두비아지를 마도 코 디마제 베제 차티마제 발라 베준치니 제구라 소아치니 녀모 견도타네 녀모라니 배 타싱마 녀모 빼뜨가 지디가라 인지 민지 기부지구다 삼르면 삼시 용이지 디게버 도와.
And so we could not, so that natural, pure, intrinsic nirvana that pervades all phenomena, we can apply that to all phenomena. It naturally is the nature, the underlying nature of all phenomena. We could not apply the second kind of nirvana, a nirvana that is a freedom beyond, that goes beyond all suffering and that is free of all temporary defilements, adventitious defilements and afflictions. We could not apply that second definition to all phenomena. We can only apply it to the minds of sentient beings. And the sentient beings need to make effort to attain this kind of nirvana. They need to put forth effort to remove those adventitious defilements, temporary defilements, whereas the first nirvana naturally exists effortlessly. It is just the true abiding nature, whereas the second is not. Sentient beings must make effort to remove those defilements. And so this is done by identifying the defilements, negative emotional states in the mind, negative thoughts, and so forth, seeing them, their faults, recognizing them as a defect of something that is to be removed. And once they are removed and eliminated, then one reaches a completely happy state.
Kalte tondam nyangan des kuro kunzup teltarnas sangi kyangno khor gyurpe chanchu chobachi chas digalata tondam nyangde dan tondam nyangde ji ta chetamje gel ngi te yison chetamje dan tenla babya yore es chetamje nilu de to chad yorwa tondam nyangde ina o khrowa kunzup yin yimbayina sangi yang ni be zembar me bare sangi yang dire ni khroa khorndo as on the ani be ti chag duas tina chanju se bichobal nyamne jine phendo mi duas chopa chugore tende mare se lengya ya digala lengya digala tende mare lagyo chaza be lubuti ja nyande dan ani raji nyande ki khepar jine lengya gures khepar che gures ta lendo oni thoyung gore.
And so here we have then in verse, and so finishing up 13, if ultimately you will now inquire, everything is said to be nirvana, samsara, which is relative, must be the same. Therefore, even Buddhahood reverts to the samsaric state. So why, you ask, pursue the Bodhisattva's path? And so here we have the lower schools that are bringing up the objection that, well, if samsara is relative, so if everything is said to be nirvana, samsara, which is relative, must be the same. Everything just reverts back to being cyclic existence. So if everything just reverts to being cyclic existence, then what is even the use of bodhicitta? Why does the altruistic intent even matter if everything is just going to be samsara, this endless cycle? And so the Prasangikas answer and say, no, it's not like that. It's not like that. And then they contrast the difference between the natural pure nirvana and the nirvana that is freedom or transcending all defilements. So they make a contrast. That comes in their answer.
자자 라진 남다기 냥데디기 디말라 누구 말레스 코랑 군 두비온드가나 디마담 라진기 디메 따바인자 라진 냥데 라브레마도 거기 디말라 너투구 말레스 디 냠렌체니 아니 마리 방가야라 소바 람 코미야라 소바 냠렌체니 두스니 디마세베 차다 다 루부디달기 냥데 디 디말랑오니 냠포테니 지거디 누그리 엔베 가서 미게와 따빠게 마리 바테도 윤체바지 용고아레 딘디가라 디기도 군섭 가서다 마리바 뇽몬데기데 베 윤체바체 투그레 시텔랭게게 어와.
And so they answer and explain, well, there is a nirvana where it said here, everything, this line where it says everything is said to be nirvana, that was referring to the natural nirvana, the true ultimate abiding state of all phenomena. And so the Prasangikas answer and say that nirvana, the natural, pure, intrinsic nirvana, even defilement can't touch. Defilement can't taint or can't touch or can't pollute or can't change. There is nothing that can be done to modify that nirvana. But the nirvana that is a freedom from all defilements and stains is something that through practice, through certain practices, one can eliminate the underlying foundation of ignorance and negativity. Through practicing the path and taking up certain practices, then one can modify and one can purify. And through practicing the path and eliminating non-virtue, one can cut the stream. One can cut the stream of negativities, and one can end the stream of non-virtue and afflictions. It's that nirvana where one can make modifications.
Rajin Yandede, Yandegi mean Tapai, Yandeg Mains, 루브티라 냐데 뭐 인세과에 대투고다.
Mhm.
살까지들람나.
And so basically, what their answer is to the objection of the lower schools is the nirvana that we speak about that cannot be changed, or as it says here, everything is said to be nirvana. That's just called nirvana. That is labeled nirvana, but it is the nirvana that is the freedom from all of the defilements and emotional, the negative emotions. That's the real nirvana that we're talking about, the freedom from those states.
다 랭게게 중대 디레다. 켄놈 윤니 마체 나스 고도 버 민주루 기시도 다 가르슬라고래. 켄놈 다 도메 머리바다 대왕게 레다 뇨모 몽부 사거와. 데디 윤체고로 머리비 윤체고로 머리비 윤 마체나 아니 비 유마타베 코로아텔레 도투 마레스. 다 디슬라드가라 유마타베 코로아도 발라 카레구도. 아 뇨몽라 견들다니 디바다 따부도 머리바다 타싱구도 뇨몽 겐남 윤이 체바나 군수도야 민주로스 겐 윤체 노디가라 데페 가르소레 타르바레 마도테 루브티자기 냥데 고인데 톱사 루브티자 냥데 토바레테 디 군소 마르테 냥데 돈담 차사레스.
Okay, yang kirchik du chena surpo ani selchenang.
겐남 윤이 체바나 세기도 겐 지금가라 머리바 토메 머리바 조이집에 달래다 녀몽 계기 유디 머리바와 머리비 균 체바이나 구습도 야민지고 오스 데데 머리비 균 체다도 갈라 고 루브디자니 냥데 차도 그레스.
Oh, lasso, yeah.
냥데 루브디자니 냥데 차데 냥데 고마데 톱도 그레데 군섭 차그 말레스.
Okay, lasso.
군섭도 야민주로스.
Mhm.
아주 이 겐란 바기 머리발에 넣어가지고 그거를 돈당 엄마데 말레당 녀모 머리발에 넣어서나 레 살사 매가 작으러와 녀모 깨매 작으러와 어때 바간지 녀모도야 겐스도 토메 머리바들이 나랑도 렌징이 머리바데 겐는 넣고 그래 세스고래.
And so, continuing on, as long as there is no cutting of the causal stream, there's no routing of illusory appearance. But when the causal stream is interrupted, all illusions, even relative, will cease. And so here it speaks about the causal stream. And the causal stream means the factor and condition of ignorance and all that comes out of ignorance, the negative emotions, the karmas committed, and so forth. This is the stream that is to be cut. This is the stream we can impact. And that's what needs to be impacted. Because when we cut that stream, when we impact these negative emotions through our practice and so forth, our different practices that we do, then negativity is purified. And so we've cut off the stream of factors and conditioning that lead to samsara. So we can then affect the illusory appearances. Because illusory appearances, so it said here, as long as there's no cutting of the causal stream, there's no routing illusory appearances. As soon as we do cut that stream, that does indeed affect, as it says here, when the causal stream is interrupted, all illusions, even relative, will cease. And so when we cut the stream of ignorance, when we end that, then even on a relative basis, the appearances will change. And this all comes through the cutting the ignorance, the negative emotions, the clinging to a true and a substantial reality. When we affect those conditions, then our resulting experience will change and be impacted as well. And that's what's being said here by the Prasangikas in verse number 15. Is that clear? Was that clear for everyone?
Kenam yunni machena sidigala karsigore thome mariba machena koral to tugu marita. So pe karza yuma to per minjuro sido ngaze da any tuji diu shindan te yebe kabla tuma yuma pe tuji begala pe te chasang somte chodiona yuma kengi yuma kar tululi or mata yuma dogu mares me acha mares tic nakachi masana te me acha duro o te najinji tape chik one maripa 둥지 받아 따티게 돈다 얼마나 티게 가르칠 거래 현남 윤이 채바나 군수도야 민주노 어쨌든가 말이 받아 배 도나 말이 발도베 뇽몬다니 티니 토바다 온발라 소바 티마 림베 모버 대주 깡가에 배 도는 그래 티니 군수도야 지금은 땡 냥데 공마다 차도 그랬어 배 님보도 야보도 아디데
And so let's look at it in its a very, very basic way. What's being said here is that if one can cut this causal stream, affect these conditions and factors, cut the causal stream, then one can be free of the cycle of existence. One can break out of the circle of samsara. In the same, but if one does not cut the causal stream, then one is still subject to samsara. In the same way that while the magician is uttering the words of the mantra and throwing about the magical dusts and substances, one will still see the illusion. The magical apparition will still be appearing. But as soon as the causal stream for that, meaning as soon as the uttering of the mantra ceases, the magical apparition ceases to be. And so to reverse samsara, or to reach freedom from suffering, nirvana, this nirvana that is free from all defilements, to break free from that, to cut the causal stream. So one must cut the causal stream, which is ignorance and all of the various things that result from ignorance that keep one subject to being in samsara. One will still be in samsara. In order to attain this nirvana, this freedom from the temporary stains, then one must be able to cut these causal, in order to do that, one must cut the causal stream. Is that clear for everyone?
Yes. Could you go back? I just wanted to make sure that I understood. As soon as we cut the causal stream of ignorance, then even the relative appearances will no longer be illusory. Did I understand that correctly?
Let me just read it as it is exactly here.
Okay.
But when the causal stream is interrupted, all illusions, even relative, will cease.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Meaning our samsaric experience.
Right.
당에 또 군수도야 또 연구 말에 땡냥데 응마데 차도 그래스 루부티자니 냥데 차도 거라 제잔다 뜬다 하고 해야 되더리 루부티자니 냥데데 오니 다 마랑주 다 베베고니 두고야 디 냥데 ngoimba 라지 남다데 냥데기 민타양 냥데기 라톱장 냥데 ngoimare 디기 디말레 늘 두고 말아 디 여비 겐지니 맞아 루부티자니 냥데데 뚝투야요 루부티 라징 냥데 메나 루부티자니 냥데 뚝야게 겐데 라고 말해
And so what's important for us here is to understand the nirvana that is being free, being liberated from all temporary defilements. And in that nirvana, in order to accomplish that nirvana, we must put forth effort. We must do something. We must strive. It is something actually that we must take make active effort in. But in the natural, the pure, the completely pure natural nirvana, that's something that already exists, that is ever existing. And it's something that defilements can never touch. They can never defile. And so this is an important distinction. But without that natural, that complete natural nirvana, that complete natural purity, we wouldn't be able to reach the nirvana beyond all defilements. It's dependent upon that natural purity already existing. Is it clear for everyone?
다때 인데라 냥데 제발라 스스 좋아지고 우다 냥데 뭐 토발라 다디 고아지 또 차나이 빼야 버려 딘디나다 뭐니 맞아 가르쳐래 뭐뭐로 찐가바데 차르다
Kare.
뭐뭐로 찐가바스데 삽제 대차르
Oh, lasso. Oh, okay, yeah.
다 가래 용거래 제자도 선잠바 제자도가 바센리 용거래 다상이는 와서 예전에 선잠베 스타와서 데니셔고리안 또 타르는 거래.
And so as far as these two distinctions, the actual, like the authentic nirvana is the nirvana that is freedom, that is beyond all of the temporary defilements. That's what we should recognize as the actual nirvana. The other is called a nirvana. It is named a nirvana, but it is not the state of nirvana that one looks to achieve. So it's not that authentic nirvana that is like the flip side of the way that we use samsara and nirvana. So that's an important distinction. And now next in the text, so now we finished those 5 points, and the next thing, Ani Kare Sapchela.
선잠바 제자도가 바스. 시계도 주랭이랑도. 니바 선잠 제자도가 바스.
So Ani Shoktan Katsula.
jibga tu churingi 462 itang ngapa
Ani simsampe ani depache.
okay
Okay. Yeah. And now next we come to, so we're going back to the outline of a commentary that Geshe-la is, I can't see myself, but I think you can see this book, that Geshe-la is using to give commentary on. And so now we come to the part in the text where we look at a specific, some specific objections from the mind-only school. And next time we meet, we'll get more into those specific objections of the mind-only school.
다 선잠바다 다 제만은 zonde 선잠바다 우마 던지와 접어줘야 돼.
And so it will be between the Prasangikas and the mind-only school. This will be a debating the points and differences between the mind-only and Prasangika philosophical schools of thought of Buddhism.
Yeah, 다
So may I ask,
맞아 제가 요소. 야, 다 시에데 네가 자가지. 와, 다 결수 되어 있나 되었다.
And so we'll stop the teaching here for today. We're coming up, I think, on about 5:30, Geshe-la said, and we can take some questions if you have questions.
I do have a question. It's actually clarification, and that is the natural intrinsic phenomena. Geshe-la said is the underlying emptiness that pervades all phenomena. That's what the natural nirvana is.
The Nyangde, Rangjin Nyamdak.
라진양 최탐적인 때는 봐봐요. 되게 디말은 누구미도 그런 왜님 붙이 두고 말아.
It's yes, it is the underlying nature of all phenomena, and nothing else can touch it, change it, modify it, adulter it.
그 냠린지니
Underlying nature or underlying emptiness?
The underlying nature.
Okay.
would
Thank you.
양
Dila yang tongpa ni.
동익이 머리발 누구 말을 때 거야요 말다. 당하는 저기라 샘기란신데 어살와. 어살와래. 디마다 루부르와래. 샘기란신라 디마 마주바테 가래래. 란신 양대 차로와. 아니 पेना बुम्बा ला मरी माले पदे बुम्बी थांगे राजिंग यांदे छादी औरवा बुम्बा राजिंग में पदे बुम्बी थांगे राजिंग यांदे रे
Rangjin mepa di rang
राजिंग यांदे बुम्बा राजिंग में पा बुम्बी थांगे चुंगी जना दिखो आता 시탐절에 때는 밥이에요. 이게 누구 말이지? 다 다 돈이 가자 로유도 차고 거네. 띵냠는잖아. 디말랑문에 머리 발문에 넣는 용도.
la
머리 가자 덴버진바 가자데 파기 문진지네. 따바타준 거 문진지네. 애네 라짐에 받아 냠는잖아. 땡진 대원 좋아 냠는잖아. 머리 발을 넣고도 머리 밖에 두고도 유르문이 요바다 케기로와 유르문은 요발은 나나 유르문이 낭줄들 견게기도 이 낭줄들 낭줄도 봐 시기나 애니 베테 왕게 머리 왕게 애니 레 왕게 니반디지게 숨반 남시 지바 미주 nga바레 봐 텐데니나 중이긴 로사데 두스체네 시도라 lunjung lu do ta tende yana jung la lunjung na lu do de la ya ya tu sre de yin de gala Raji Nyande, Nyande women see other Karaza, Raji Nyande, Chitamje than tell by yore, Nyan ko Chitamje than a mind, Korango Kaputela, Nugu Marte, Ko Zachene, Ko Nyaminchena, Lubutita Nyande to be a yorwa.
Mhm. And so when we have the natural pure nirvana, so this is something like we heard in the quote, that, for example, the nature of mind, which is, it is clear light, radiance, something that cannot be affected, cannot be changed, cannot be altered, cannot be stained or tainted. And this is the same, this nature that we are speaking about that exists at the basis of all phenomena. For example, we could take a vessel, a vase or a cup, and its very underlying nature, which is a lack of intrinsic nature. What it comes down to, so that lack of intrinsic nature is emptiness, but that's a negation. That's which is being negated, true essential nature. That's the object of negation. But what is the nature of that vessel is dharmata. And again, this dharmata is something, that cannot be influenced. Ignorance cannot influence dharmata. Ignorance cannot affect that natural, pure, intrinsic nirvana. Ignorance cannot affect that. So when we use, and emptiness, cannot affect that, or interdependence. We use words like interdependence and emptiness and interdependence to contrast if an object has any authenticity. And if an object, and so we use that to negate any authenticity. And then so I hope that made your question, I hope that clarified your question. So
Kind of, yeah. Can you dharmata, because I'm hearing you use that term a lot and I'm not that familiar with it.
Pena di bomba gi neluk tingone di chuni sana
Pumba Tuzana, Pumbetanga Juni, Pumba Rajing Mapata to the Orwa.
yene morang di chuni sana kanda kawakari langore pena nga injitone dharmata di injitone di dharmata sungido yana yang morang di o dharmata sana di kariyore.
Shini Siadang, Tijini Siadang, Nelu Siadang, there's a Tonta Chipper, the Ming Kakare. See Kambuji Kakare Mother, Tonta Chipachikare.
So whether we call it dharmata, the true abiding nature, true nature, actually all of these, emptiness,
Tijini,
suchness,
there's a Tonta Chipper.
all means the same thing. It means the basic raw material, the very, very basic nature, underlying basic nature.
Is that also primordial nature? Or is that something different?
Dundam, di dun.
Tondam Dembazana, Re. There's a Tonta Chipper, Tongi Loku Mother, Nelu de Sedugala Tongi Loquare Mother, Janda Yomare.
Di Germane gi neluk. Yeah, primordial nature, ultimate nature,
Okay,
all mean exactly the same thing.
okay, thank you very
And it
much.
can be unaffected. It is unaffected by anything. And
Thank you.
that is what is at the meaning when Geshe-la was explaining the two nirvanas.
Mhm.
That's the meaning of the first one, not the state to be attained that is beyond affliction, but
Okay.
do we have other questions?
I have a question for Geshe-la, going back to how we know whether an action is virtuous or non-virtuous. And I just wanted to know if my understanding is correct. So from what I understand, when we perform an action, if we perform it with compassion for the beings that action affects, and if we do it with a knowledge of reality, of a knowledge of what is actually happening, that'll be a virtuous action. For example, last time Geshe-la told the story of the Buddha in one of his previous lives was a ship captain. And he had a man on his ship that was planning to kill 500 people. And so he killed that man, but he did it with compassion, both for the 500 people that he saved and also preventing that man from doing, from getting the negative karma from killing 500 people. And he also understood the laws of karma and that action would have put that man in hell. So am I understanding that right? That's how we know whether an action is virtuous or not? And are there other ways of knowing that?
Ani pena ngatsurgi chirpa dela ani gewa yimpa nguzin cheagi kolore ani di pelcher di re ani pena nga lega chik chena ngala ninje yuna pensem yuna shenda la ani pender yuna dematse yang tawa zine ani pensem tone lega chikchena pelcher di geware di chikche di gewa yimpa ngozen chetap chik rebe di ni yuna ninje dang tawa ni ani pensem ninje tawa ani dene ngoma kerang di kerap di sangegi kerap ki ani trong di koala ani pena dedu di ngone di sepa di namgyun dikpa ani dikpa senayang dekapsu kong pen ani pensem tone ninje tone senayang ani pena di
Bezuchela masaparwa.
re yana tap shendak yana ninje dang tawa ani yana di tapshi chikre di gewa yimpa hako yaki tapshi ani tapshi shendak yana di gewa yimpa di migewa yimpa
다 이 탑시전다데 제발 개와 주와 가르치기 생일라도 대직도도 랑기 가르치는 손다들라 수조 대와티 땡긴지나 대 개와치 사르투나 랑기 짜와데 제니 수수로 동알지기나 디 미거와 임바 다티 랑기 야보지 냠집만 맞으나 렘상 시야도 고 레신디 코 빠자갈 잔로도 신고 차르고도 시다 이 하고 말와 다 수수 빼기 윤두 빼 냠집 찌기인도나 되는 뭐자지 투그로와
kunong karela
뭐 단다 랑기 자와 간디치 바이나 델베 네 지시하게도 따따렌도 미도 그뒤나 심지어 진 누구이나 하고로와 Tena name
카리심 주체 디 차와디 아메나 디 콘롱 당
kulonda chawade chidikala kulonda chanchuki semgi mazina gawatab chirun rugu marwa. Ta chawa kandichi cheba ina susi chimjuche ani yundu chara chigi ina tikuru susu hako yale lela chagruwa ngocha thugurwa. Temata lega chigi ro depe tona meba cheba ina ti hak ngocha thuyake yo marwa. Kanchi chebale dewa juwa karchu kisingi chidikala kati ina susi nyamjiba masona pe semna chara chin degenjila ta ngone ha ngoja thugure temada khabure mazuma chejita ti tanangana ina ni gujdo gebkite dela ni chara chigyo marwa maje ina ngi ti migo kazu chigyo hago marwa kanche nangbe chui ngoma jena seri bayang tabana jirido kati ina susule 심지 지구다.
And so really one thing to focus on to see if something is virtuous or non-virtuous is to really focus on is it bringing about happiness or is it bringing about unhappiness? Is it helping or is it harming? And it's really important to have a constant microscope on that as it relates to what you do, say, and think, all of your actions. And it's very, very hard actually to, if we don't have a constant examination, because some of karma and its imprints and so forth is very deeply hidden. It's something that's not easily seen. And some karmas and imprints have already been planted and are deeply hidden. But we can keep a very, very close eye, really keep the microscope on our actions. And is it bringing about happiness or is it bringing about unhappiness? And really, really constantly look at that. And of course, motivation. Because if what one is doing doesn't hold the motivation of doing it to be helpful, doing it with a wish for it to be a benefit and of good, with a heart of goodwill and a wish to benefit, then it won't be. It will not be a virtuous karma. So, in other words, we must constantly watch what you're doing. And that's because if we lose interest in what we're doing, well, without interest, we won't constantly scrutinize. So keeping an interest in the very point that you bring up is really key, because you really have to watch and be very scientific about this, because the answers aren't hard and fast. Is what you're doing bringing about happiness, or is what you're doing bringing about suffering? And that's something that you must watch. And it's important to keep an interest in it, because the minute you lose personal interest and amount of time goes by, a good amount of period of time goes by when you may not be aware of how many non-virtues you may have committed. So it's important to constantly keep that tension of interest, and be introspective and really watch that, really scrutinize, be almost like a scientist to see what you're doing, watch what you're doing and see, is it bringing about happiness or is it bringing about suffering? Did that answer your question?
Okay, yes, that makes sense. You want to develop that habit of virtuous actions in each small action.
Then
Ninji tebun ninji chengi mina lungdun se badale ledi chene ledi sayo maris masa pade karazana koran gyulla chanchu ki semiyo be topgi pemba pe shu chumbuji tangbuni ni 고 가자도 고반이 있네. 가자 코나라 미지 솔렌지마다 용거 말에 민갑게 솔을 겹두 버와. 가자도 고반이 있네. 고바체도 와. 가자 고발타네. 고바체바 요 통네. 수수 베테가 뢰단샤르다. 셈기 떡기. 티 떡기 콜레 레드 사요 마레라고 그래. 때마세바 전지 사바고 말해. 만나서 파말라 파메 뿌르를 샤다 연내게 뿌르 저방에 임바지디가라 파메 펜섬 군는 토좀 바제도 또또 싱여다다나 레사고 마르세라고 그이 파말라 저마마 임비 니제 여러 불로 펜섬지 여러 대왕들이 다때 니제 따파 니제 삼로마다제 두스 토좀나다 녀바용구로 간지 니제 생인데 시부지 누가 첨부지래.
So we have to look at the power of compassion and bodhicitta. And so in that story with the ship captain, the action was performed. The action was performed, but the karma was not accumulated. The negative karma was not accumulated. And that is because of the great compassion that the Buddha had, the great compassion that really wished to save the 500 people. And yes, there was one life lost, but 500 people were saved. And there was the power of great compassion that really was the underlying force here. And that's a very, very important thing. So two things to look at when another way to examine whether something is virtuous or non-virtuous is to always apply that examining the help to harm ratio. Here, the Buddha helped 500 people and hurt one. And so we can also use that formula when we're deciding what to do. Is it going to bring more harm or more benefit? So we can look at that help to harm ratio. And also we can look to see, is it really based in sound, firm, authentic care and compassion? Because the power of mind is something that's a really, really important factor. And one doesn't have to be a great level bodhisattva for this power of mind to really be the factor here. Because we can look, for example, at parents who love their children. Really, they have such love for their children. And out of the wish to really help them, they may spank them and discipline them in harsh ways. But parents have such true and authentic, such unfabricated compassion and love for their children, so sincere, that they, again, this is an action that is committed, but no negative karma is accrued because of that unfabricated caring. And so the force of compassion is very, very, very powerful. And so those are other factors to add into looking at what you're doing. Is it virtuous or non-virtuous?
That makes sense.
Yeah. 다 주도가 진송고 교수님.
Almost 6 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll make our dedication prayers.
장조 삼조 림보치 마키 빠나 긴규치 갸와 냠바 메바야 코네 콘도 베와르쇼 가리라웨 코이징감데 펜다데와 말린조 제레제원 덴징갸조이 자베시데 파도 땡겨로지 잠벌 바웨치 더kim바타 콘도 삼보테한테 대다 군기지소 달롭치게 완데다 삼제로동 두숨시베 갸와 탐 모간라 초동 아바다 라젠게 자원 잠보 쭈치랍도 모와라기
Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person, Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyaltso, remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience, and as did Samantabhadra too, so now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Diane, more thank you.
Geshe-la, more thank you. He has incredible patience and
Geshe-la.
forgiveness. Yes, yeah. And are you on the Slack, you know?
I am, but I don't know that I understand it.
Okay,
I'm,
all right.
I'm 73, so you know, it's that.
Okay, okay, got it. Anyways, I came across something on the term Neluk. If I come across it again, I'll post it up there. It was in a scholarly paper, but it had a nice any explanation for anyone. I will look for it again. You know, when you're looking for something, you can never find it, so it may take me a while. Also, I wanted to just remind people about Jason's meditation. So Jason has open meditation a few days a week now. So if anyone is looking to meditate and just, you know, just like having a walking buddy or a gym buddy or a study buddy, sometimes it's nice to do it with others. Check out, Doug, they can look on the homepage.
Yes, it's on the schedule on the website. So
Yeah,
check there to see which days he's doing that.
yeah. So if you want to join in some sitting meditation, there's plenty of room.
Diane, what was the term you used that you were going to try and find? The Neluk?
Neluk.
What's Neluk?
I think you asked about it before, but it's what you're trying to get to, this understanding of Dharmata.
Okay,
The
okay.
question you asked today, and it
Okay.
really goes in, yeah. So, and it's translated in English, and I thought it was interesting, and I will put it up in the general when I find it again. And if I can figure out how to get it from one device to another. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Kazandi는 roya marwe.
La.
Kazanti. Karsa. Niti mingi nambra mabujar nge kurgo.
Oh, de. Oh, ding, yeah. Also, yeah, there's another.
Nge kurgo.
Okay, I have it. Jigme damche.
Jime tamjoge, yeah.
Yeah. So there's Tanda Lona Jela.
Kadilon digro te konzo te any konzo search and digro at YouTube na mampu ragre te tanda.
So actually, if you go on, so Geshe-la reminded me that there is a quote by Jigme Damche, a really great master who spoke about some of these synonymous ways to express Dharmata and so forth. And so there's a quote already out there in Facebook land and in Slack by Jigme Damche about when we analyze how objects exist and what they are in and of themselves, we find nothing of that in the investigation except through, and then it goes into some of these different terms that are synonymous with Neluk, which is true abiding nature, Dharmata, inherent disposition and so forth. So you can go and look more about what Jagnidam said as well, if you're on Facebook or Slack.
I'm looking at Slack right now, and so I would go to quotes.
Mhm.
All right.
If you go, I put, everything is in the quotes. And this one is about when one analyzes and investigates the manner of how objects in and of themselves are existent, we find nothing other in our objects of investigation except for establishment through imputed conceptions. So the reason, I mean, I think it's good to read it yourself, because when you get into these philosophical statements, sometimes you have to read one sentence 3 or 4 times just to wrap your head around. I know I do. So
Only
it's
4.
anyways, if you don't find it, message me and I'll get it to you specifically, but I think you'll find it there.
Okay, how will I message you? I'm in Mexico. I mean, what do you use for messaging?
Message no need what say visa. Just through go.
On Slack, there's a place where you can private message people. You can send me a direct DM or direct message on Slack. Play with it. You'll be sending messages to everyone as you play with it. But yeah, just play with it.
All right, thank you so much.
Missy need visa, then problem.
What?
Missy need visa, then
No.
problem. Missy don't need visa. That's okay. She's sending, you getting.
Yeah, doesn't even have to have a COVID test to get.
Missy doesn't matter. Free, Missy, everything free.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Good
Really.
to see you.
Take care, everyone. Be well. Stay safe. Bye. Bye, Gisela.
Bye-bye.